Hi everyone, Kelly here, and today I wanted to share with you my December reading wrap-up, and I just feel like December lasted forever for me personally. I don't know what that was. Maybe it's because we switched up the way we did homeschool and did kind of more just Christmassy, Advent stuff the whole month, but it just seemed to go on so long, and so I read a lot of stuff. I read 18 things and then a couple of DNFs. So to make this speed it up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the Christmas books and just do like super short, like one sentence summary and one sentence of whether I liked it or not type of thing. Trying to keep it really short so that we can move on to the other books, because you're probably not as interested in the Christmas books now that Christmas is over. And I read like 8 Christmas books. So let's get through those really quick and then move on to everything else. First, I read 10 Blind Dates by Ashley Elston and gave this one 5 stars. This was actually a reread. I read it the Christmas before. 5 stars both times. This is about a girl named Sophie who her and her boyfriend just break up at the beginning before she goes to her grandparents for Christmas, and then her huge family decides to set her up with blind dates for 10 days over the Christmas break. And it's a cute book. It's funny and interesting to read. I just have a great time with the different dates she goes on. Some are really bad, some are fun, some are good guys, whatever. And then, you know, there's a love story that is happening over that, a little romance. So that one, really highly recommend. And then I read Black Witch Magic by Mila Nix, and I gave this one 4 stars. This is it seems like it would be more of a Halloween book, but it kind of is like that perfect in between Halloween and Christmas. It would be perfect for November, because at the very beginning it is Halloween, but then the majority of the book is at Christmas time. So this is about a woman named Celine, who her family comes from a line of witches, and so she's kind of like ostracized in town, and then these 2 guys show up in town that are paranormal hunters, and so they're looking for the witches that live in this town. And then one of the paranormal hunters and Celine, so his name is Aiden, and Celine start to like develop a friendship and all that stuff, and she doesn't know that he's there to basically hunt out her family's secrets. And it was a cute romance, but then there was also some bigger issues going on with like her and the town and how she's kind of like seen as other, and on the outside there was some kind of like creepy or like scary moments, but it all takes place during Christmas as well, so it's kind of like that perfect combination of the 2 holidays. And then next I read In a Holidaze by Christina Lauren. I gave this one 5 stars. Christina Lauren are sometimes hit and miss from me, but I just really love this one. Read it in like a day, just devoured it. I'm sure you've heard the synopsis of this since it's been around, so it's kind of like a Groundhog's Day for Christmas time. This woman that keeps reliving her Christmas holiday, and it's a romance. I loved the found family kind of aspect about this, because her family goes on vacation every year for Christmas with her parents' like best friends. So there's like another family, and then like 3 families, and then 1 single man that are all like have been friends since college, like the parents' age have been friends since college, so the kids have all grown up together. So yeah, loved that found family aspect, thought the romance was cute. Really highly recommend that for next Christmas. And then I read Hercule Poirot's Christmas by Agatha Christie, and I gave this one 3 stars. So I just didn't love this one. In terms of the Hercule Poirot mysteries, it wasn't my favorite. Hercule Poirot was barely in this book. It felt like it could have not even been in that series, because I feel like he was just kind of slotted in, but it wasn't really he didn't feel like he really had much of a part other than just to tell the solution at the end. So that was a little bit off, but this is kind of about a family that is coming together for Christmas time that hasn't been together for a long time. So the siblings have been all over the place, kind of estranged from their father, and then they all gather together, and then to like and the father was talking about changing his will, and then he dies, and then it's like, who killed the father? Is it about the will? All that stuff. So yeah, and so we're just investigating all the suspects. Everybody seems suspicious, so that part was really entertaining. But overall, I just thought it was an average mystery. So 3 stars. It was fine. It was a Christmas mystery. but not necessarily like amazing. And then next I read A Holiday by Gaslight by Mathews, and I gave this one 5 stars. I absolutely love this. This is probably my favorite of all the Christmas books that I read, and I'll probably be rereading this next year. This is a historical fiction, but it's more on the like, I don't know how to categorize historical romance because I'm not very fluent in the genre, but I think that they call some clean romances when they don't have sex in them, and then moving up to like, you know, smutty romance. I don't like those terms because it seems like one's appropriate and one's not, which there's nothing wrong with sex in books. So I don't really like those terms, but just so you know, if you don't like sex in your books, this does not have any sex. The farthest they go is kissing. And I just thought it was a super sweet romance. It's a novella, and so like it was perfect that it didn't contain sex because it just seemed like, you know, it would have naturally progressed to that later, but it was so short that just having it lead to kind of romantic feelings and kissing was like perfect for me. I also just love the Christmas vibes in this. They had a lot of like decorating and going out into the woods to pick, you know, pine boughs to decorate with and all that stuff. I forgot to tell you what this is about. So this is about a woman named, I think her name's Sophie, and she and Edward have been courting for a while. So they knew each other before this, which is also great for a novella. They've been courting for a few months, and things just don't seem to be going well between them. Like she feels like they're just not connecting. And so she, at the beginning, calls off their courtship. But then her father's pretty upset because her father was relying on her marrying this guy for the money and all this. And so and it's right before Christmas. He was supposed to come home with her to the country for Christmas. So she goes to him and is like, okay, I don't think we gave our relationship a good try. I don't think we were honest with each other and really were ourselves with each other. How about you come with my family home for Christmas and let's just forget all the like proper way to do things, and let's just be honest with each other, and if we like each other at the end, we can keep courting, or we can just say we're done. And I really liked how for a historical romance, she just lays it on the line. Like there's not a lot of that like secretive, like having to be proper so I can't talk about my feeling type of thing. Like it just felt like, hey, this is how it is. I don't think that we're suited for each other, but let's just give it a try in a more relaxed setting. And I really enjoyed that. I thought that their build-up of the romance was really great because they were starting to communicate with each other more, so it doesn't have the miscommunication trope a lot of romance has. And like I said, very Christmassy. Loved it. Would highly recommend that one. And it's pretty short. I definitely would read more by Mathews. She's got a lot more like full-length novels, and really enjoyed her writing and the chemistry she built. And then I read The Christmas Swap, which I gave 3 stars. Didn't really enjoy this one. This is by Melody Carlson, and this is a contemporary Christmas romance about this woman, Emma, who is going on vacation for Christmas with her best friend and her best friend's family because her parents are gone. So yeah, she always spends Christmas with her friend's family, and they were doing a house swap. So they go to Colorado, and then the people in Colorado were supposed to go to Arizona, I think. And so they're switching houses, but it turns out the guy who owns the house ended up not leaving. And so he is there in the guest house. His name's Tyler. And so Emma and Tyler start developing a relationship while we're there. This is also, I think, a novella. And the problem with this one is that because they just met at the beginning of this, it felt really rushed to like kind of the way their relationship felt really rushed. And then on top of that, already feels rushed. There was this whole like almost love triangle thing. There was a lot of miscommunication. For a novella, there was just too much going on with like the outside forces affecting their relationship. And so I just couldn't get on board with them being together. And so yeah, I just didn't find it that interesting. So nothing necessarily wrong with it, just didn't compel me or make me root for them. So 3 stars. And then next I read The Earl's Christmas Pearl by Megan Frampton. This is another historical romance. I hadn't done a lot of reading of historical romance in the past. I didn't think I liked the genre, so when I read Holidaze by Gaslight and loved it, I was like, oh, maybe I'll try one that has like more on the smutty end. And that's what this one definitely has like sex in it. And yeah, it didn't work for me. I ended up giving it 3 stars. Maybe I'm just not into the ones with smut. This is about a woman named Pearl who is kind of like Home Alone. She's accidentally left in her city home by her mom, kind of was busy shopping and left her, and she doesn't know how to, you know, cook and light the fire and all that stuff. So she goes next door, and there's a single young Earl that lives there who's also home alone for the holidays on purpose. And so like they start like hanging out together so that they can help each other with food and warmth and all that stuff. And it wasn't even like the sexy scenes that bothered me. It was like the dialogue was so cheesy. Like anytime they talked to each other, I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm like rolling my eyes. I just felt like the dialogue was just too much for me. I didn't really enjoy, I didn't feel like the connection between the two of them. And then when it did come to the sexy times, it felt kind of one-sided for me. And this just might be my preference, but I like it when there's more of a sharing of the event. I felt like it was definitely one side was getting more enjoyment than the other. And it just wasn't for me. So yeah, didn't work for me, 3 stars. And then the last Christmas one is the Enchanted Sonata by Heather Dixon Dallwork, and I gave this one 4 stars. So this one was recommended to me by Kara from Wild Brook Garden when I was having a really hard time reading Christmas books in November. I asked for recommendations. She said this one, and I think this was really a great recommendation. It was a great thing to read in December. It's a fantasy book, so it's not like a lot of the Christmas books that we see, and it is a mix of like a Nutcracker retelling mixed with Pied Piper, and I would also say that it has a little bit of Phantom of the Opera in there too. So it's a mix of a lot of classic stories and very enjoyable. So it's very much falls along with the Nutcracker that our main character is Clara, and she gets transported to this world where the prince has been turned into a nutcracker, and she has to help the prince defeat the rats in order to take over his kingdom again. And there's like a bad guy who's like basically the Pied Piper. And yeah, it was just like very whimsical and fairy tale like, lots of fighting scenes, but then like the romance was cute because, you know, he's still a nutcracker while they're like falling for each other, and I just thought their relationship was sweet. I wouldn't go into this expecting like a lot. I enjoyed it by just like going with the flow, feeling the Christmas vibes, liking the retelling of these classic things. It's just a sweet Christmassy vibe book, but I did enjoy it quite a lot. So that's all the Christmas books. Sorry, I feel like that even took a long time, even when I was trying to be short. So let's move on to the books that didn't involve Christmas. So let's start with my DNFs. I DNF'd 2 books this month. One was Twilight by Stephenie Meyer. If you watch my videos, you know that I've been trying to read Twilight for months. Like I started in the summer. I just couldn't do it, guys. Like I was trying to reread it so I can read Midnight Sun. Now I'm not even interested in reading Midnight Sun. That's what it's called, right? I just couldn't even make it through Twilight this time. I had enjoyed this when I read it like 10 years ago. But yeah, Bella was just annoying me. Being in her head was just too annoying. I just gave up. Did not finish it. I think I made it halfway through and then DNF'd that. And then the other one I DNF'd was European Travels for the Monstrous Gentlewoman by Theodora Goss. This is the second book in the Extraordinary Adventures of Athena Club. Is that what it's called? So I had read the first book in November, really enjoyed it. It's a mix of like classic fictional gothic characters like the daughter of Frankenstein and Jekyll and Hyde and all that stuff. And I really enjoyed the first book, but the second book was just so slow. It was very long. I just couldn't get into it. And I decided I enjoyed the first one enough. I don't want to torture myself to like push through a book I was not enjoying. So I gave up on that one, and I'm okay just giving up on the series. So those are my two DNFs. And then I had one book that I did not rate because I just could not settle on a rating for it. And that was The Need by Helen Phillips. And this is just kind of a weird book, and that's part of why I couldn't rate it. But I did enjoy myself. I'm glad I read it. So this one, I actually got this as a recommendation from somebody that hated this book. So I watched another booktuber who gave this book 1 star. But this is why I think it's important to talk about the books we don't like, because sometimes what you don't like in a book, others will love. So this other booktuber had said they didn't like it because it was too focused on motherhood. They were expecting more of the speculative fiction aspect and not the focus on what it's like to be a mom and like the day-to-day drudgery of being a mom. And I'm not saying that it's bad being a mom, but we also know, those of us that are mothers, that there is a lot of just like day-to-day mommy, like kind of stuff going on. And this book is perfect for that. So if you're a mom, I would recommend this book, but it is also speculative fiction, has a little like horror elements in it as well. So what this is about is a woman named Molly who, I don't know what her job is called. She's not like an archaeologist, but she like digs up fossils of plants. Is that a paleobotanist? Is that what she is? Yeah, so she digs up fossilized plants, and she was digging in this site with her coworkers, and she keeps finding these objects that are like objects in real life, but are different. So yeah, there's a lot of weird things going on. So things are just slightly off, some of the stuff that she finds in this thing. And I don't want to tell a lot because it's short. So I'll just stick with, yeah, she's digging. Weird things are coming out of the pit. And then also she's at home with her kids. We're going back and forth between those things, her job, and then she's at home with her kids and she thinks there's somebody in the house with her. So it has that horror element. Like the first third of this book just had my heart like pumping of the like being home alone with the kids, her husband's out of town, feeling like there's something in the house with them. And yeah, so there's all that, but then there's also just taking care of your kids and the day-to-day of like their needs. And I think that's why it's called The Need. It's like what you need in life and what needs you and all that. But the reason I didn't give this a high rating, because even though I loved the first half of it, the second half, not that it got weird, I think the whole thing is supposed to be weird, it just got like almost incomprehensible. Like I think if it had been really short and it had been a novella, it would have had a lot more impact. But by the time of the end, I was like, I don't really care anymore. Like I get what you're trying to say. I get the speculative fiction aspect. I get the parent aspect, and I'm just like done. And yeah, I didn't really enjoy the last like third of the book. So that's why I don't know what to rate it, because I would highly recommend it for parents that like speculative fiction, because you would have both aspects of that. But I wouldn't say that it's a new favorite or anything, because I didn't love the last like third of it. I was kind of tired of it by then. So yeah, take that for what it is. And then my 3 stars, I'll go through really quick. One was The Night Country by Melissa Albert. I did talk about this in the series I had finished. This is the second to the Hazelwood. And I just didn't love this as much as the first book. Like I said, 3 stars. It was middle of the road, but I really loved the Hazelwood, so I wanted to like this more. But it felt a little more convoluted. It took a while to get to the actual plot of the story. So this duology is about Alice, who I think she's in high school in the first book, and her grandmother writes all these fairy tales, and they're dark fairy tales, and kind of like her discovering that world of the fairy tales and everything. And I do really enjoy the dark fairy tales that were in this book as well. But yeah, I just didn't love it as much as the other one. It did get better as it went on, but just didn't love it. And then the next one that's 3 stars was One by One by Ruth Ware. This was talked about a lot in 2020, so I don't really need to go into it. Like there's a group of people, coworkers, that get stuck in a chalet during an avalanche and people are dying. What's happening? And a lot of people didn't like this because it was very predictable. And I didn't dislike it because of the predictability. I knew going in that it was going to be pretty predictable of like who the killer was. I think it was pretty obvious who the killer was, but that's not what bothered me. What bothered me was that I was enjoying the process of people finding out who the killer was and like all that stuff. And I was enjoying the whole isolated murder mystery. But then we get to like the climax of the book and it just kept going and going and going. And I was like, okay, can we stop it? Like it just, the climax of the book took too long to fulfill, to the point where it got boring, and you're not supposed to get bored during a climax of the book. That's kind of the point. And then the climax ends and it just still felt like the book kept going. And so I just feel like if she had cut down the ending, that this would have just been a simplistic murder mystery that was like fun and kind of had a big ending. That would have been better than this dragging on at the end. So that's why I didn't personally enjoy it that much. And then the last 3 stars, I was a bit disappointed that I gave this 3 stars, but that was The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett. People were loving this book in 2020. People were raving about it, so I picked it up. And I should just know, I don't like overhyped books usually. I just could not get into this book a lot. So this is about 2 twins that, I can't remember when this, because it goes into different times. I think they're in the, maybe in the 60s at the beginning when they're young. I don't know. It covers a whole like range of time from when they are teenagers, the twins are teenagers, up until when they're older, and we follow their like kids when they're older, like in their 20s. So it covers a long range of times, but when the twins are teenagers, they leave town. They're from the South. They leave town, and one of the twins lives her life as a black woman, and then the other one decides to pass as white and marries a white man, has a white child and all that stuff, and just pretends that she is just white. And so just kind of like what that's like following the 2 twins. And I just did not find it very interesting, except for I loved following one of the daughters, Jude, the daughter of the woman who lives her life as a Black woman. I loved her daughter's story, and if this book had all been about Jude, the daughter, I would have been all for it. I loved her relationship. I loved the things she was going through in her mind of dealing with her identity and like, yeah, just, and her family and all that. I loved following Jude, but anytime we would go back to following one of the twins, I was bored and just was not interested. I just didn't feel like it really dived into what was happening there enough for me. I don't know. Not that I need like high action, because I don't think Jude's stuff was high action, but Jude, I feel like we got to know as a character. The twins, I still don't know anything really about them. Like, even though we were following them and that's the premise of the book, I don't feel like we got to know them as people, where we really got to know Jude, and so I enjoyed her more. So that's just my thoughts. All right, so now we're going to move on to my 4 stars, and I had 3 4-star books. First was the original by Brandon Sanderson and Mary Robinette Kowal. This is a short, I think it's like a novella, and is only available as an audiobook, and so I listened to it, and it was fun. It's just a sci-fi, fun, adventure kind of story. It is about a woman named Holly, who, in this world, there are clones made, and usually if a clone is made, I think the original is usually dead, but in this one, a clone is made in order to go and hunt down her original, and that's kind of the thing. We're following the clone, and we're trying to find out what did the original do, like what kind of crime did she commit in order to have an original, a reproduction made to come after her. I just thought it was fun. 4 stars, but not like necessarily a new favorite or anything, but really enjoyable short read if you want just a fun sci-fi to listen to. And if you don't have Audible, because I don't have Audible, I was able to get it from my library, so you could probably get it as an audiobook even if you don't have Audible. And then the next one that I read and gave 4 stars was The Walls by Holly Overton. This one took me a long time to read because it does have some hard subject matter, so I'm going to talk about it. It's written on the back in the summary, so I think it's okay to talk about it. Our main character, Christie, is she works at a prison in Texas, where she is the liaison for people on death row. So she is the one that talks to the press about the death row inmates, who sets up the interviews with press or with like lawyers and stuff like that with the death row inmates. So there is that kind of trigger warning if you have, like, there's a lot about death row and death row inmates in here, and there are executions that take place on the page that Christie is present for. So that's something to know. And the other thing is, so Christie is a single mom that has been alone the whole time of her, like, since she and the dad of her child are not together and weren't together after her child was born. He's like 16, so for 16 years she hasn't had a relationship. She falls in love at the beginning of this book, and then things take a turn once her and her husband are married. So there is a lot about domestic violence in this, and that's why it took me a long time. When we got to the part about domestic violence, I put the book down because it was pretty intense, and then I decided to pick it back up and finish it. I do really like Holly Overton's writing, because the way she does, this is the second book I read by her, and the way she does her thrillers is they don't really feel like thrillers. They're more like emotional dramas that have some thrilling moments. Like the very first chapter in this was thrilling, but then I would say there's not a lot of thrilling stuff till towards the end, but there is a lot of like issues going on and emotional things happening. So just to keep in mind those like things about death row and domestic abuse, if that would bother you. But other than that, I do think this was a good story about like, what would you do to protect your family and to stand up for yourself when the system doesn't do it? And I think that's a big part here about women and domestic violence, of when you can't go, because she's like in Texas, when you feel like you can't go to the police officers for help, what do you do in that situation when you have a family to protect? So I do think there's a bigger conversation happening here that's important. And then the last 4-star book was When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. And this is one that I was really close to giving 5 stars, and I'll tell you why I didn't, but this was a brilliant book. I know that it has gotten mixed reviews. Like when you look on Goodreads, it gets a lot of low reviews, and I don't get it. I think it was so well written. And this is basically a thriller about gentrification. So we're following our main character, Sydney, who is in her neighborhood that she has lived in her entire life and has been a predominantly Black community for a long time, and then now white families are moving in and pushing the Black families out. And I just thought that like the way that she handled this and turned it into a thriller, it's just like, it's stuff that is really happening in real life, but she's tweaking it just a little bit to kind of speed it up, like make the gentrification happen faster to make it like super creepy. Like basically Sydney hanging out with people in her neighborhood, like a neighbor, and then the next day that neighbor is gone without any like discussion about moving or anything like that. And so I think by speeding the timeline up, it like makes this thing that's really happening so much more creepy. And the racism that is involved with that, of like, you know, suddenly the place she's been going for her groceries the whole time is now owned by a white family and is not treating her good at all. And like just that like switch of like the things that you've gotten used to and the places you go to in your neighborhood suddenly being a hostile environment. I thought that was like brilliant the way it was done. The reason that I gave it 4 stars instead of 5 was that there was this romance that kind of happened throughout the book. And I get that Alyssa Cole is a romance writer first. Like I think this is her first thriller. And so she probably just is used to putting romance in all of her books. But I'm just one of those people that doesn't usually like romances and thrillers, and it didn't work for me in this book at all. I just didn't feel the romance chemistry. I thought like they were, especially towards the end, it was like we were getting to some life and death situations. People were in really hard situations and there was still a romance happening, and it just didn't work for me at all. Like I just can't do that a lot of times. I even do that with dystopians. I just don't get it when the romance becomes such a big part of the plot, when you're like, you guys are gonna die. Who cares if you like this person? So I don't know. Maybe that's just personal preference, but that's part I didn't like. But I think this was a really well written book and just an important topic to talk about. So I would highly recommend reading it, and gave it a very high 4 stars. And then I have 3 5-star books. I've talked about all of these in some of my Bookmas videos, so I'll try to be quick about it since I know this is getting long. The first one was March Book 3 by John Lewis. This is the conclusion to his graphic memoir trilogy. I've talked about this a lot in a lot of those Bookmas videos. So just to keep it short, this is about his time when he was a young man in the civil rights movement. I think the fact that it was done as a graphic memoir makes it really accessible and has a big impact in the way we see the violence that was happening, and the like fortitude for people to just keep going day after day, peacefully protesting while being like attacked. And yeah, I thought that this was really well done and loved this conclusion. And then the next one that I gave 5 stars was A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor by Hank Green. This is the conclusion to a duology, which the first book is an absolutely remarkable thing. And this is sci-fi, but it's like light enough sci-fi that I think it's accessible for anyone. And I've talked about this book endlessly, but just real quick, it's about this woman, April, who finds a statue in New York City and is the first person to find it and like talk about it online. And then it turns out these statues are appearing all over the world, and is it alien and all that stuff. So it is sci-fi. And the second book very much leans on some moral things. And so if you don't like that, where the morals are really forefront in a story, you might not enjoy this. But I thought it had really great conversations it was talking about. I enjoyed the audiobook a whole bunch, so I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was really well done. And then the last one that I absolutely love, like favorite of the month, was How Long Till Black Future Month by N.K. Jemisin. This is a collection of short stories, and every single one of these short stories was brilliant. Like, not that I gave every short story in this collection 5 stars, but when I averaged out my ratings of all of it, I think I was at like 4.25, but I rounded it up to 5 stars because even if I didn't love a story, the concept was so imaginative. Like, all of these are sci-fi, speculative, fantasy, and each and every story just sucks you into this new world, this new group of characters. It's super diverse. And yeah, I just think if you're going to pick up a short story collection and you like sci-fi or speculative fiction, pick this one up, because I just think she's brilliant. Like, the way she can pull you in. Like, I don't always love short stories, but this one made me realize I can love short stories if they're like something that can just pull me in and absorb me, because my problem with short stories usually is they just don't like suck me in, and I'm like, oh, it's over before I really get into it. Where every single one of these, even if I didn't fully love it, I was in that world and sucked in and just thought they were amazing and brilliant, and I definitely want to read more by N.K. Jemisin. So that's it. Whew. Sorry, that was a lot of stuff. This is why I usually like to split up my recent reads into smaller videos, because that was a lot of books to talk about, and I have a hard time being short about talking about books. So hopefully you stayed till the end and saw my 5-star books. I would definitely, if I can recommend any book, it would be How Long Till Black Future Month, and then also Holiday by Gaslight for next Christmas. Those are my 2 favorites of the month. If you want to talk about any of these down below, I'd love to hear your comments, and I will see you next time. Bye.